everyone. Thanks for joining our call. We'll get started in just a few minutes. Hi guys, thanks everyone who's logging in right now. We're waiting just for a few more people to join. We have about 250 already on the call, but we know a lot of people have signed up. So let's just give people 1 or 2 more minutes and then we're gonna get started. So we have some great questions. One thing I just want to note is that we are not going to be taking questions directly from the audience because we have so many we know will be coming in, and we have pre-submitted questions. But what we're going to do is we're going to go through some of the top questions that we've received and answer them throughout the call. This is a webinar, so we will not be your video and your sound will not be working, so you don't have to worry if you're running your video, we can't see you. That's just how it'll work. But we can see your questions in the chat box and your comments. Okay, so we're at 300 now, and I'm sure more people are going to be joining, but we will be, we're going to get started now. I just want to welcome everyone and thank you for joining our webinar. My name is Julia Bryan and I'm the chair of Democrats Abroad. I'm joined by Rebecca Lammers, who's the Taxation Task Force member, Jennifer Racco-Stepper, who's DA Austria's chair, and our special guest, Nathalie Goldstein. Nathalie is an enrolled agent and CEO of MyExpatTaxes. As many of you know, our main mission is to elect Democratic candidates by mobilizing the overseas vote. 2020 is a very particularly important year, as you all know, since we will be voting for a new president in November and we desperately need a new one. I think we can all agree that getting Trump out of office will make the world a better place for us, for our families, for every citizen in the world, in fact. So please take a moment to make a note of a URL which we're putting in the chat box, which is votefromabroad.org. Make sure that if you have not registered to vote this year, you do that so that you can receive your absentee ballot and cast your vote in your state this November. Now, before we get started, our legal counsel has reminded us that we need to review our disclaimer with everyone. Rebecca, could you read that for us?
Yes, so I'm going to share my screen so everybody can see. We just need to make sure that everybody is aware that Democrats Abroad cannot provide individual tax advice. Advice requires consideration of your individual circumstances and needs, none of which can be done on this webinar. We are not tax lawyers, accountants, or advisors, so please consult a professional tax advisor or accountant or return preparer when addressing your personal tax matters. Democrats Abroad does not endorse or recommend companies or individuals attending or hosting this webinar. The views expressed at the event are those of the respective individuals and companies, not Democrats Abroad. No liability is accepted by Democrats Abroad for the opinions expressed or for any errors or admissions expressed about matters of tax in any country, your financial planning, or your legal obligations. If you're in need of tax advice, you can consult the American Citizens Abroad Tax Return Preparer Directory to find an advisor or tax return preparer near you, or providing online services to meet your needs and budget, though buyers need always beware. Now that we have the legalese out of the way, we can get on with the rest.
Well, thank you so much, Rebecca. That's fantastic. And that, you know, all of these points are very important for everyone to keep in mind. We're here to help everybody, but we can't provide personal advice. So one thing we can do, though, is we can advocate advocate on behalf of all Americans abroad. And that's what we have been doing for decades on issues of taxation, including FATCA reform and residency-based taxation. But since the CARES Act was first started to be discussed, we have also been in contact a great deal with Treasury and the IRS, as well as advocates of Democrats abroad in Congress, trying to ensure that Americans abroad are eligible and are able to easily access any financial relief that's made available to help Americans during this crisis. For more information about our requests, visit the link that Rebecca's going to pop into the chat box right now. But you can also always go to democratsabroad.org/taxation to find out more about that work. It's really something that we have a very, very active taxation team always working on these issues and advocating for you. And I think it's also important that we pay attention to what's happening, and we appreciate your feedback. And now I'd like to welcome Nathalie. Nathalie, are you ready to take it away?
Yes, sure am. So I will take over the screen sharing now.
Great.
Perfect. So you can all see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
So yeah, let's get into the good stuff. Taxes, the CARES Act, and everything we need to know as expats abroad. So a little bit of an intro. Who am I? Nathalie Goldstein. As Julia mentioned, I'm from California, now based in Vienna, Austria. I have a background in finance and information technology, and I'm specialized in US expat taxation, which is what led me to create MyExpatTaxes. So as I'm sure everyone in this call knows, there's a lot of great tax softwares in the US if you are still living in the US, but as an American abroad, those tax softwares can be quite limiting for us. I had this problem when I first moved abroad, and so I created MyExpatTaxes to be a way for all of us to just breathe a little easier when it came to US expat taxes. Aside from that, I'm an enrolled agent. I'm admitted to practice before the IRS, and I'm here to tell you everything you need to know about the CARES Act and how that pertains to you as an American abroad. So again, a little bit about the software. This is my sales pitch, and then I'll stop. But of course, if you are looking for any tax support during this time, MyExpatTaxes is a great way. We e-file for you, which a lot of people do not do for expats. Obviously, anyone in this webinar gets a voucher code, so we'll send out the slides as well. Don't worry about taking screenshots or anything like that. So let's get started. What we will cover today is the CARES Act basics, right? There's a lot surrounding the CARES Act, but the things that you need to know is who's eligible for the payments. I know most people in this call are here to know about the stimulus payments. How much are you getting? Can you get money? How will it come to you? So that's what we'll talk about. Who's eligible for the payments? How much is the payment? And how will the IRS give you the payment, right? That's the big question, especially for someone living abroad. And then of course, with that comes the natural questions of, do you even need to file your taxes? What do you do if you don't file taxes? What do you do if you should have been filing your taxes and you have to get into compliance? I will give you a big hint right here. Do not freak out as you hear about all this tax, laws and what you need to do. The most important thing is that you're learning about it, and there's a lot of amnesty programs and ways to catch up. So just kind of a disclaimer for everyone, don't start sweating before you know how easy it can be to get into compliance. And then of course, what are the filing deadlines? Yeah, so the CARES Act. What is CARES? Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Safety. That is what CARES stands for. It's important to know. And I think as an American abroad, these are other important terms to really know when you're talking about the CARES Act, when you're asking questions about it. So an American abroad, all US citizens, living, working, retired, whatever you're doing, but you're primarily outside of the US. Right, you may or may not have been filing your taxes every year, but you are a US citizen and you have, probably have a US passport, probably have a US social security number. So the next part about that you need to know is, what is this economic impact payment? As that's the IRS official term for the stimulus checks. I think almost all media outlets call it the stimulus checks. Some people just refer to the $1,000 check, the $1,200 check. It's all the same thing. It's the economic impact payment. If you're going through the IRS website, if you're talking to the IRS, this is the term you should use. If you use stimulus check or something else, they probably won't be able to answer your questions. So just make sure you use official terminology when looking for this information via the IRS. And this is a $1,000 or starting at $1,200 payment that every American or lawful resident should receive if they meet the eligibility requirements. The payments are made between mid-April to December this year. Payments have already started going out. Do not freak out if you have not seen your payment go out. They are going out really kind of in batches at this point, but we'll get to that. And also don't freak out if you haven't been filing your 2018 or 19 taxes, because they will still be going out for the remainder of the year, so there's time. Now, other things to know is, what is a valid social security number? This is your tax identification number for US citizens and lawful residents. You do not have to be a US citizen to have this. Green card holders may also have a social security number, but the main thing is that you need a valid social security number, not an ITIN, not something else. And then another term to know is dependent of another filer. What this means is has a parent or a guardian claimed you on their tax return? This is a question you have to ask your own family to know, right? But it's something important to understand about your own situation. So eligibility, right? Do the economic impact payments extend to Americans abroad? The short answer is yes. Yes, they do. There is nothing in the CARES Act that says this is limited to only people living in the US. This is for anyone that has a valid social security number, like I said, not an ITIN, but a valid social security number. They are not claimed as a dependent on someone else's tax return. And normally there are no income thresholds in terms of having a minimum income. So if you have zero income, you've never filed a tax return, you pay $0 US tax because you're only living abroad, you only have foreign income, it doesn't matter, right? You should still be eligible. But if you're a high earner, you may get a reduced or no payment option, right? So the IRS does not say you need a minimum income to meet the threshold, but they do say if you're earning too much, they're not going to give you this additional payment. I mean, I guess that's fair. But the next thing to know is, do you need to file taxes to be eligible, right? I think that's been pretty much the big question surrounding this and having a lot of people freaking out. It's a yes or no. So if you meet the US tax filing thresholds, which we'll get to, then yes, you definitely need to file your taxes if you want this payment. You'll have to file either 2018 or 2019 taxes ASAP and get into the IRS system. If you should be filing and you have not filed your taxes, the IRS does not know about you. They don't know where you live. They don't know your bank account details. They have no way to know what your income is. So how will they send you a payment? That's pretty much the basic thing there. But if you don't have a filing return obligation or you make too little income, that doesn't mean you have to file your taxes. That just means you have to add your information and payment details into the IRS non-filer payment portal, which we'll get to with all links and screenshots on how to use it and who should be using it. But the main thing as you sit through this webinar, and if you're wondering about your own situation in taxes, is just to understand, do you need to file your taxes? If yes, make sure you do so. If you don't need to file your taxes, where should you be entering your information and making sure that you enter in the right place? Because there are, unfortunately, a lot of people doing scams right now, right? The IRS is not going to call you and ask you for your information. They're not going to reach out to you. They have a payment portal. You use it from their official site and you enter it. Do not enter your information anywhere else unless you're working with a certified tax agency or preparer. Otherwise, any other emails that may be coming saying, give me your social security number or address, don't do it. So, filing requirements. Do you have to file as an American abroad? I think this is the age-old question. And the answer is not the best answer, but we all know that and we all live with it. Americans abroad are subject to the same taxation laws as their family and friends back home. Open up your US passport if you don't believe me. I even have a screenshot. This is how serious the IRS is about this, that in your passport, if you flip to the back, they have a section saying that all citizens working, residing abroad, file your taxes, look at this publication, contact the IRS. You have to file your taxes no matter where you work, live, no matter where your income comes from. If you meet the filing requirements that are the same for people in the States and outside the States, you have to file your taxes. I'm sorry, I don't have a better answer than that. Now, things to keep in mind, every year the filing requirements change. When I say filing requirements, I always mean income. Filing requirements are based on income. If you generally make under the standard deduction, which changes every single year, you don't have to file. There are some exceptions. But if you make over it, the IRS does expect you to file your tax return, even if you only have foreign income reported on it. Now, another thing to note is just when we talk about everything, the current tax season is always the year before. So I know we're in calendar year 2020. The current tax season is 2019, just to make sure everyone's on the same page. And now you'll see in this table on the right, the examples of the tax filing requirements for 2019. I think the most shocking one that I tell expats, because a lot of us fall into this category, especially those that moved for love, right? Is that if you ended up marrying someone that is not a US citizen and they don't voluntarily elect to get an ITIN number and then volunteer all of their income information to the IRS, you're going to be filing married filings separately. You're married, you cannot file as single, you cannot file as anything but married. You might be able to do a head of household, but generally you're married filing separately. And if you're married filing separately, I don't know why they did this, but the income threshold is $5. It's not a typo, it's $5 US. They changed this back in tax season 2018. And so that's something to be aware of. That is something I think I've gotten the most questions about, because when people look at the non-filer portal, it says if you've made under $12,200 as single, then you don't have to file. That's not necessarily true, because if you're married filing separately, the threshold's only $5. Keep that in mind. Otherwise, everything else is pretty standard. It's in line with the standard deduction. So single is $12,200, head of household is $18,350, and married filing jointly or qualifying widow is double the amount of single. So that's easy to remember. Another thing to keep in mind, if you're self-employed, even if you're self-employed abroad and you have nothing to do with the US, if you have over $400 in self-employment net earnings, you have to file, because you might be subject to US self-employment tax, which is different than US income tax. I know it's a lot, but basically these are the things to keep in mind. So these are the thresholds now also for 2018. I'm not going to read all of it. It's in more detail. You can make your screenshots, or of course the slides will be sent out later, but this is what you should really look at to determine, okay, do you need to file or not? Self-employment's not included on this. So just keep in mind, if you're self-employed, you have more than $400 net earnings, which is your business income minus business expenses. You should be filing as well, because you might be subject to US self-employment tax. Otherwise, I think here is where a lot of people might start sweating and thinking, oh my gosh, I needed to file. I had no clue I had to file. What do I do? Don't worry about it. There's a lot of people that did not know they had to file. And if you are ahead of it, if you move ahead of it before the IRS ever contacts you, they're very forgiving, they're very understanding. You may not believe me, but I talk to IRS agents all the time. For the most part, they get it, it's complicated. They have programs for you. Just follow the steps, you should be fine. So that's a lot of information right there that I just threw at everyone. So what I'd want to do now is, of course, you all sent in some questions ahead of time. I picked essentially the most common questions that relate to what I just talked about. And here are the questions and answers. So in terms of filing requirements, I have a lot of people that say, I only have US Social Security benefits and foreign Social Security benefits. When I say foreign, I mean non-US. So if you're living in the UK, if you're living anywhere else in the world and you have Social Security benefits from that country as well, combined with your US Social Security benefits, do you need to file a tax return? Generally, yes, because the IRS only says you don't need to file a tax return if your only income is US Social Security benefits. But in this situation, your only income is not only US Social Security benefits, it's US and foreign Social Security benefits. And on top of that, normally when you have foreign Social Security benefits or pension payments, you end up using a form called 8833, which is a form to basically take a claim from a tax treaty between the US and your resident country. If you fail to disclose a treaty-based return, the penalty is $1,000. So that sounds very extreme, but essentially what I'm saying is in this situation, if you have a mix of Social Security benefits from both the US and another country, the safer thing is to file, right? The IRS website does not specifically cover the situation because of course they cater to Americans in America. But again, when they say if your only income is Social Security benefits and you don't have to file, they mean US Social Security benefits. So that's number one, I think the biggest question there was. And then of course, the other question that always comes in is if all of my income is from my resident country, so it's not US source, nothing to do with the US, I don't live in the US, I don't work in the US, I don't have investment income from the US, I have nothing related to the US, I only have foreign income, do I need to file a return? Yes, if you pass the filing thresholds I talked about, right? So when we're thinking about the filing threshold, and if your income is over that, you have to take in every single dollar, pound, euro, whatever you've earned and add it all together, right? And when I say that, I mean salary income, self-employment income, income that you did on the side from Upwork or some other gig or, you know, anything else, pension income, Social Security benefits, unemployment that you might get in your resident country. You have to add everything up, right? Because the IRS taxes US citizens and residents on their worldwide gross income. So very important, all income from all over the world, no matter where, from all sources, and it's the gross. So it's not after deductions, not after taxes that have been paid, it is the total amount. And if that amount is over $12,200 for a single filer, $5 for someone that's married filing separately, $24,400 for 2 US citizens living abroad filing together, or $400 net profit for a self-employed person anywhere in the world, you have to file a return. Your rules are no different than the rules for someone living in the US. So that's the main questions on filing requirements. I'm sorry it wasn't a better answer. I know it's a bit disappointing for a lot of people, but generally, if you're working, if you're earning income, no matter where you are, you're probably having to file your US taxes. So now comes the question, oops, I haven't been filing, I did not know, what do I do? So this is pretty much the main thing is there is an amnesty program, and I'll get into that. But basically, when you do the amnesty program, it's 3 years of back taxes, which is why I say you'll paper mail your 2016 to 18 back taxes, and then make sure to e-file your 2019 taxes. So if you have not been filing, you realize you should be filing, and you still want this economic impact payment or the stimulus check, start filing, right? It's really important that you get all your ducks in a row. And while you do this amnesty program, it can take a little bit longer because of course that is 3 years worth of back taxes and potentially foreign bank account reports. And that also needs to be paper mailed. So that can take quite a bit of time. What you can do to make sure that you are in the system in time for the payments is do your 2019 taxes like normal, right? So you still have to do your current year. And just make sure that if you can e-file, right? Because then it's in the system a lot faster. Right now, if you call the IRS, most of their hotlines are down. The international hotline is down. If you send in paper mail, I mean, I don't know about your country, but I'm in Austria. We're not even sending mail out to the US or internationally at this point. So I couldn't even send anything from here to the IRS. And if they even got mail, it's gonna take them up to 16 weeks to process anything. If they even get to it that fast, that's just the processing time. So again, if you can e-file, try to e-file. If anyone in this call has already done their 2019 taxes and they paper mailed it, it'll get in there in the system. I'm sure it'll still be in there before December, right? So don't worry too much. But just for anyone that has not done it, try to e-file. It's going to be to your advantage. So the next set of questions is your family and the payments, right? So before we get into the payment amounts and how that's all added up, how does your family impact the payments? Who's eligible? How should you be claiming everyone? So someone asked, my husband's a green card holder and files jointly with me. Is he eligible for stimulus payments? If he has a valid US Social Security number, yes, that's pretty much the number one thing. I'm pretty sure that your husband shouldn't be claimed as dependent on someone else's tax return, but of course, something he should ask around and make sure. But generally, a valid Social Security number, yes, good to go. And then for people with kids that are younger, right, this is kind of where a little bit of strategy needs to come into play. So someone asked, my kids are 16 and 19. Can they get the payments? How much can they get? And they haven't filed taxes as they're still claimed as dependents. Pretty much what do you do, right? So again, if they have US Social Security numbers, they are valid for the payments as long as they're not claimed as a dependent on your return. Now, a thing for everyone in this call to note is any children under 17 with a valid Social Security number, I would say you should claim them on your tax return. Why? Because you could be eligible for an additional child tax credit worth up to $1,400 per qualifying child. This has nothing to do with coronavirus. This is just a normal tax benefit that all US expat families are entitled to. I have US expat families that have 3 children. They make a good amount of income. They pay only foreign taxes, and they're getting a refund of $1,400 per child, so $4,200 for their 3 children every single year from their US tax return. So this is nothing new. And definitely if you have children under 17 with valid Social Security numbers, put them on your return so you can get the additional child tax credit. And then because they're a qualifying child on your tax return, you'll also get an additional $500 from the stimulus payment, but we'll get to that. Now for children that are 17 or older, it might not be the wisest decision to include them on your tax return. Why? You cannot get the additional child tax credit. They are not under 17, and they're also not eligible to help you get the additional $500 because that's only for qualifying children under 17. So claiming them essentially gives you no extra money and also ensures that they don't get any money. So for these children, if they're 17 or older, it may be a better decision to keep them off your tax return and then have them go into the non-filer portal and enter their own payment information. So that way you don't get anything extra from them, but you wouldn't have anyways, but they may be able to get the full payment if they weren't required to file a tax return. Keep in mind, if they're over 17 or any age and they meet the filing income thresholds, they need to file their own tax return, period. So the filing thresholds are not on age, it's on income. It's always on income. Another one, so you just had a child born in 2019. First off, congratulations to anyone that faced this situation. That's amazing. And the next question is, how do you make sure you get them included on your stimulus payment? So make sure they have a valid US Social Security number. These things are not automatic. You do not automatically have a Social Security number when you were born. Keep that in mind, especially if you're living abroad. You will have to make sure that you get a valid Social Security for your child. This means that you will need to make sure they have a US passport, they're signed up at the US consulate wherever you live, and that you apply for a Social Security number for them. This process can take a while, so if you have not started, it is not too late, but definitely get a valid US Social Security number for your child before the due date of your return. We'll get into due dates, but basically main thing there is if they already have a valid US Social Security number, go ahead and put them on your 2019 return, e-file ASAP. If they do not have a valid US Social Security number, start making the moves to get one for them, right? I have a lot of people that say they don't want to get social security numbers for their children because they don't want their children to have to file taxes later because it's not fair. Their children live abroad. They'll never live in the US. It doesn't matter if you have a US social security number or not to determine if you have to file taxes. If they are a US citizen, they have to file taxes when they grow up, unless, you know, we can all get together and somehow get, you know, residence-based taxation, but let's not hold our breath too early for that. So getting them a US social security number does not mean that you're putting them into the system. They're already in the system if you sign them as a US citizen. So just kind of something I know I see a lot of people talk about, but just, you know, getting them a social security number does not put them in a position that forces them to file taxes. It's them being born a US citizen that kind of put them in that situation. So moving on, that was essentially the first part of the questions and answers. I know there are a lot more questions, and we will get to that at the end portion, but this was really just kind of a way to summarize some of the burning questions that you might be having, and I hope I got to them. So let's go back to the CARES Act and the fun part, the numbers, right? I'm sure this slide, it might be interesting for most people, even if you don't like numbers. How much are you getting paid? So $1,200 for individuals, single, married filing separately, head of household, qualifying widow. If you're a individual filer, there's no one else included on your return, the base amount is $1,200. If you are a joint filer, so you're married filing jointly with another person on your return that has a valid US Social Security number, that's $2,400. So it's just double the amount, right? Every individual still gets the same amount, but of course, a joint filer, there's two people on the return. Now, there's the additional $500 per qualifying child. That means they can be claimed as your dependent. When I say claimed as your dependent, there's a couple qualifications you have to meet. So for example, their main home needs to be with you. They need to live with you for over half of the year, right? So even when I say that, if they're born in December 2019, they're obviously not born for the whole 2019, but if they were living with you for half of the time they were alive in 2019, that still qualifies as them living with you half of the year. So aside from them being able to be claimed as dependent, that's number one. They're younger than 17, that's number two. They have a valid US Social Security number, number three. So if this is your qualifying child, then you get $500 extra on top of your base payment. And just keep in mind, if you do have qualifying children, you should also be looking to claim the additional child tax credit. That is independent of this whole pandemic, but just a very nice family benefit that the IRS pays out to its citizens wherever you live in the world. Now, the next part, I mentioned that high earners do not get the full payment, right? So those payment amounts that I told you about, if you earn zero income, you're entitled to them. If you earn up to the maximum adjusted gross income that's listed in the first portion, you will get the full amount. But if you make more than this, then that's when your payment gets reduced. And that's when you probably have to pull out an Excel sheet and figure out how to know how much your payment is, or just wait till that payment hits your bank account, right? So if you're a single filer, it's 75,000 US dollars. Keep in mind, US dollars, everything's in US dollars. If you have up to 75,000 US dollars as a single filer, you should get the full payment. If you get more than that on your 2019 or 18 tax return, whichever one was the most recent, then your payment will get reduced, right? So for single people, if you jump down to the next section, you will still get some amount of money if your adjusted gross income is between 75,000 US dollars to 99,000 US dollars. If you're over that amount and you have no qualifying children, you're probably not going to get payment because you're deemed a bit of a high earner, understandable. And then we have the other filing statuses. So I won't read out all the numbers, it's there for you, but it will be important for you to understand where do you fall in this and how much money you should expect, right? Now, I think the next question that comes from that is, what is an adjusted gross income? That is not so clear, and only people that do taxes or really are savvy about taxes knows. Here's your adjusted gross income. If you are filing your taxes, this is how you know what that number is. So if your most recent tax return was in 2018, you can look at your 2018 Form 1040, which is the summary form for all taxes, line 7. I highlighted it there. If your most recent tax return was for 2019, it is Form 1040, line 8B. So I know it's confusing. You can blame the tax reform and the whole turning the tax forms into postcards, why everything got mixed up and the lines change. But the most important thing to figure out your adjusted gross income on your tax return is to just look for the words adjusted gross income. It's always going to say that on Form 1040, and you can figure it out from there. Just so you know what is adjusted gross income, that is all of your income, all your taxable income that's combined. So salary, self-employment, net profit, dividends, investment income, rental net profit, etc. That's all combined, minus any adjustments. So adjustments include everything from IRA deductions to student loan interest payment deductions. And then that becomes your adjusted gross income amount. So that is what is used to determine how much your payment is. Again, even if you made $0, you're still eligible for this income. It's only if you made over these amounts that you're no longer eligible for the payment. Good. Now the next question is, how is the IRS even going to make a payment to you, right? I think that's already confusing enough for people living in the States. Now, we don't even live in the same country. How will the IRS find you and give you money? There's two ways. Option number one, which I think everyone would prefer, is a direct deposit into your US bank account. This information should be on your 2018 or 2019 tax returns. I know a lot of people are freaking out right now because it is generally not unless you get a refund. Most tax firms, most tax softwares do not ask for your bank account details unless you are due a refund. Generally, most expats do not get a refund because they don't pay taxes in the US. And so they've never given a US bank account to whoever prepares their taxes or added it themselves on their tax return. That's okay. You can use the IRS economic payment page to add your payment details. I'll get to that. Little spoiler alert, the tool did open today. Another spoiler alert, the tool's very glitchy, basically not working for anyone. So don't hold your breath either. And don't keep hitting refresh. But main thing is, if you want the IRS to deposit in your US bank account, you have to give them that information. It's either on your tax returns. If it's not on your tax returns, then go ahead and add it into the IRS payment portal. If you do not know if the IRS has that information, just go into the IRS payment portal when it works, right? Which is probably going to be in a few days. And then you can check for yourself and make updates as needed. Now, a lot of you probably don't have US bank accounts, especially those that never lived in the US or moved away a long time ago. Because why? Don't worry. If you really want direct deposit, there are options. So there are a lot of free options out there. I named TransferWise. I've seen N26, Revolut. There's a bunch of them that are out there. I just say TransferWise because a lot of our clients use it. I don't work for TransferWise. I cannot speak on the company for their behalf, but I know that it will allow you to create a free US bank account. I do know that our clients that have created bank accounts using TransferWise have put that information in our system and we have successfully e-filed their return. What I do not know is if the IRS stimulus direct deposits will successfully hit these TransferWise accounts and how easy it will be for you to bring it into your own local account. So I don't know that because we're in uncharted territory. I know that it generally works for refunds from the IRS, but again, use at your own risk. There will be a slide in here that talks about how to open a bank account on TransferWise if you want to do so, because we had a lot of questions about it. It's not that clear cut. But most important thing is use at your own risk. I don't work for this company. I can't say if the IRS is going to be 100% successful in it, but what I can say is there's options to get a US bank account without being physically there. right? Aside from this choice, which is more free, that I said, of course, when you do a money transfer, that's not free. But there's also other options I've seen out there from organizations where you can pay to get a US bank account. I'm not gonna name them, but if you do enough research, you'll figure it out. Option number 2, you can just get a paper check sent to your most recent mailing address. Your most recent mailing address is also on Form 1040. So just if you're unsure of what the IRS knows about you, look at your Form 1040. That will tell you everything that the IRS knows about you. That is where your address is listed in terms of your mailing address. That is where your bank account details are listed if they are there, which is usually at the very end of Form 1040. And the IRS will send paper checks to foreign addresses. It doesn't matter if it's a US address, a foreign address. It's just, if it's a foreign address, you can definitely expect it to be really snail mail. It's gonna take a lot longer than it would in the US. I think right now, this pandemic, if they send anything out, it's gonna take even longer because of a lot of countries stopping international mail. So keep that in mind. The checks generally have a pretty long time frame to be cashed, so I would not worry about the checks expiring unless you really don't see it for like a year or so, but I don't think that should be the case. The only thing to be wary about is most non-US banks do not take checks. I can't speak for every country. I do know for the most part in the EU, we don't like checks, right? You're basically asking some teller in the bank account to pull out this dusty machine and try to cash this, and then they're gonna take a big chunk of your check. So that can be something annoying, but to go with that, there are ways to cash a check from abroad. You'll have to talk to your bank and see where the options. I have seen people endorse checks. I have seen people take pictures of checks from their mobile phone when they're abroad and upload it into whatever app their bank has, and it gets cashed into their account. So just, there's options, but make sure you're aware. And again, on the side, you'll see that filers, there's a payment portal. And if you've moved recently, so you already filed a tax return for 2019 and you've moved already afterwards, you can, of course, update your mailing address in the payment portal. You should be able to, that's what they said that you could do. But you should also file a Form 8822. That's a paper mailed form. The link is there. It's very straightforward to fill out. Just fill it out, and that is a guaranteed way to make sure the IRS will update your mailing address. So the filer portal, this just opened today. You've probably seen it all over social media. There's a lot of issues. If you've tried it yourself, you know what I'm talking about. But basically, this is what the portal looks like. It's for anyone that's filed a 2018 and 2019 federal tax return, and they want to check on their payment status. When is the payment coming? How much are they getting? They want to change their payment information, so bank account and mailing address. So what you would do is you would go to the link at the very top. Make sure you start on the IRS page, irs.gov. Do not enter your information anywhere else unless you came from the irs.gov page, and then you were linked to their payment portal. I cannot stress that enough. This is a prime time for scammers, and only trust links from irs.gov. If you just go on irs.gov, you will find all the information right away as well. So anyways, once you get into the portal and you hit Get My Payment, what you will see is the screen on the left, and that will ask for your social security number. So you need to have the information. You need to have your birth date. You need to have your street address and your postal code if there is one. This can be pretty hard for people that don't know what the IRS has as their mailing address on file, but try it out, right? You don't necessarily get kicked out for too many attempts. The only thing right now is I did it with my own. I did it with other, I've asked other people to do it, and everyone pretty much gets this status on the right. Payment status not available. That does not mean that the IRS does not have your information. That just means that the IRS basically made this tool go live a little bit earlier than they should have. And I've read a lot of different articles coming from the States. So it's not just a problem for Americans abroad or foreign addresses. It is a problem for everyone in America and abroad. The tool is just having a lot of problems right now. It's either completely overwhelmed and doesn't work at all, or it gives you this payment status not available. I've seen probably one person in every forum I've been in today that had success, and they said they used like an Edge browser after 10 attempts and it finally worked. So don't freak out if you don't see your information. just try again tomorrow or the next day. I'm sure it will get itself sorted out. So the other portal I talked about is the non-filer portal. And this is for people with low income, no to low income, and they're below the tax filing threshold. So what this tool does for you is effectively files a tax return on your behalf. Because if you go through it, you'll fill out a Form 1040, which is a tax return. And when you do that, you effectively tell the IRS that you are under the income filing threshold by doing this. So do not do this if you have to file your taxes, because this is not some tool that's separate from all of this. This is a tool that is effectively filing a tax return for you, saying your income is under the filing threshold. And if that's not true, I mean, you're filing a fake tax return, right? That is what it is in the end. So a couple known issues for Americans abroad, if this should be the tool you're using, you need a US phone number to get a registration code. I know that Democrats Abroad has written a letter to try to sort this out and ask for an alternative method, but so far this is what it is. It does ask for state issued driver's license. You should be able to leave this option blank. That's what they say, but I didn't go through this portal myself, but I've seen people raise these issues. And another thing that I have seen my clients go through is if you end up needing to file a 2019 tax return later, if you use this portal, you will not be able to e-file anymore because the IRS already has your data in their e-filing system, and they will say that someone else already e-filed under your social security number, which means if you need to file a real tax return later on in the year, the system will not allow you to do it. So you will have to paper mail, you may have to amend. We don't know yet. We just know that the IRS system thinks you've already filed a tax return. So again, filers beware. The IRS non-filer portal does list the filing income thresholds. What they do not list is the $5 filing threshold for married filing separately or the $400 net profit self-employment filing threshold. They only list for single and married filing jointly. So it can be a little bit misleading. Right? Again, just beware and know what your situation is. When do the payments come? The first payments have already started. So they are coming out. I see that for the ones that they're coming out for, it's generally for people that have always been filing their taxes. They filed their 2018 tax return, they e-filed it, and they filed a 2019 tax return earlier in the year. So January, February, early March. They were due a refund, so they had their bank account information on that tax return. So those group of people, they are already seeing the payments hit their US bank account, right? They don't necessarily get a notification, they just see the amount come in. So you should be able to check your payment status on that payment portal tool I talked about. Hopefully when it works, again, I think it's just gonna be a few days, then it should be fully operational because they just launched it today. And Americans abroad have up to December 31st, 2020 to receive a stimulus check. So don't freak out if you think you're way behind and you won't get it. If you take the necessary steps to either sign up through the non-filer portal or file your taxes properly, then you should still be able to get the stimulus payment. It might just take a little while longer. So just keep in mind, if you want a stimulus payment sooner than later and you have to file taxes, file your 2019 taxes ASAP. If 2018 taxes are not in the IRS system, e-file if you can, it's gonna speed things up. Paper mailing can take up to 16 weeks or longer for processing time. And obviously, until it's processed, the IRS cannot make a payment for you. And then make sure that you're tax compliant and file the years you need to. So you can do everything at once. You can file 2019 now and then work on your back taxes. You don't necessarily have to work on all your back taxes first and then file 2019, right? You can do it in parallel to speed up the process a bit. So with that being said, streamlining and back taxes. What to do if you've never filed, now you realize you need to file and you want to file. So there's a US tax amnesty program for Americans abroad, for Americans, but Americans abroad. So what you have to do is just complete your 2016 through 18 back taxes and 2013 through 18 FBARs, foreign bank account reports. Even if you haven't filed for over 3 years, so you haven't been filing since 2010 and you need to file, it's fine. Just file up to 2016. If you do that and you do the F bars, you will be forgiven, right? If they accept your application for the streamlining procedure, you're deemed caught up with the IRS and all your taxes, even if you haven't filed for 10, 20 plus years. So it's a great program. There's no late filing penalties charged under this program. There can be interest charged if you owe taxes, but most people don't owe back taxes doing this program. Only in special cases such as those that are self-employed and owe US self-employment taxes, or those that are in very complex expat tax situations that owe taxes from foreign investments or corporations. A lot of people actually end up getting refunds because they had W-2s that they didn't file for, or they have children that qualify for the additional child tax credit. Anyways, that's the streamlined procedure. That's for back taxes. Because you do that, you still have to file your current year taxes. Don't forget about that. So again, like I said, e-file 2019 ASAP, so your information's in the system, because obviously the IRS doesn't know about you. You've never filed before. Just filers beware. Again, most US-based tax softwares don't allow e-filing for Americans abroad. I don't understand why not, but a lot of tax softwares, if you are married to they call it non-resident alien, so a non-US citizen that does not have an ITIN or social security number, they will not e-file your return for you. I'm not sure why they do that, because you can e-file a tax return with a non-resident alien, but they don't allow it. So just make sure that whatever you use, if you're going to pay money for it, make sure you can e-file. Otherwise, you can always paper mail it, right? So if you choose to do your taxes yourself, and it's totally doable to do that and do your taxes yourself, just keep in mind you have to paper mail. It can take longer to get in the system. Prior years normally cannot be e-filed. In some cases they can, so it really depends on your situation. But through the streamlining program, they have to be paper mailed, so this can be delayed in processing. So again, if you're filing back taxes, make sure you also file your current year, because your current year is probably going to get in the system a lot faster than your back years. So people ask about prices. Obviously, I work for my own tax company as well, but the streamlining package is not the cheapest thing out there. We try to make it affordable at 149 euros per year, plus 100 euros professional review. So about 700 euros, 700 US dollars. The average market price is about $2,000. It's a bit crazy, but again, just be aware, whatever you get into, be comfortable with the price, be comfortable with the people preparing your return, be comfortable with whatever software you use. It is your own financial situation. Don't let anyone, kind of bully or scare you into paying a lot of money or doing something, right? You should make an informed decision about it. So basically, from there, we get into the federal tax filing deadlines. So this is another part of the CARES Act. So aside from the stimulus checks, what they did do was extend the deadlines. So the filing and payment is due now on July 15th, 2020, rather than April 15th, 2020. I think everyone has April 15th ingrained in their heads if you had lived in the US, but for this year, it's July 15th. And the special thing about it is it's filing and payment. Right? So no interest is accrued before July 15th, 2020. That never really happens for the IRS, so this is quite the exception. I know that as American abroad, we always have an automatic extension to file until June 15th, 2020 anyways. For us, it's not that we get even more months ahead of this June 15th deadline. We're the same as the Americans are in the States. July 15th, 2020 is our filing and payment deadline. If you want another automatic filing extension, you can do so with Form 4868. It is automatic because once you file this form, you get it immediately, but you do have to file this form. You can get the deadline to October 15, 2020. That does not mean that you don't have to pay earlier than that. You should still pay if you owe taxes on July 15, 2020, because interest accrues from July 15, 2020 moving forward. Right, so just keep that in mind. That's only really for filing, but payment is still generally due on July 15, 2020 if you don't want to see interest accrue. So back taxes, that's pretty tricky, right? Because technically they were already due. I just say ASAP, because if in the case that you do owe some back taxes for some, reason or another, interest has been accruing since that due date, right? So you should at least understand what your situation is and if you owe taxes so you can pay the amount and stop the interest. And I mean, if you're already at that process, just file, right? If you need to, it gives you peace of mind. But again, it's your own financial situation. You have to make an informed decision about that. So I have talked a lot. I will let Democrats Abroad come back and allow me some opportunities to drink water at this point. Start giving me more questions.
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Natalie. I'm going to give you 5 seconds to drink water, and then we're going to jump into our questions. But really, that was so super. I never knew that listening to information about taxes could be so pleasant. But our first question is, how should someone claim relief if they fall below the income requirement and aren't required to file?
Use the non-filer portal. So when this PowerPoint is sent out, you will see the link to that. So if you don't want to wait, because that may take a day depending on the recording and everything, you can go on irs.gov right now. They have right there on the website, non-filers, enter your payment information.
Great.
Just go there.
That's irs.gov. We'll pop that link in the chat box. So super. And our next question, go ahead, Rebecca.
I can't turn my video back on.
I'll get that done, but go ahead with the question and I'll turn the video
go
back
ahead.
on.
So there's been a lot of confusion because there's a lot of information saying that I need to be a US resident in order to qualify for this payment. But I'm obviously an American living abroad. So why do they keep saying that I need to be a US resident? But you've just said that we still qualify. So how does that work?
There are only 3 things for eligibility. You have a valid social security number, you are not claimed as a dependent on another person's tax return, and your income is not over the high earner's income limit. If you are eligible from these, no matter where you live, no matter where you're a resident, you are eligible for the payment. You can read it on irs.gov as well, which should be your only source of truth, right? It lists that these are the eligibility requirements. I don't see anywhere on irs.gov that says you have to be living in the US. That is not anywhere in the law. I think really it's just, obviously a lot of people are speculating about this, but just trust what is on irs.gov. That is your source of truth.
And when they say US resident, they mean tax resident.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Generally, when they say US resident, they always mean tax resident. As a US citizen, you are always a US resident or tax resident. So it's not necessarily based on where you live.
Perfect, thank you. Go ahead, Jennifer.
She's on mute.
Oh, unmute yourself.
I've already filed my tax return for 2019, but it does not contain bank details as I'm not entitled to a refund. How do I provide the IRS with my US bank account details in order to receive the CARES payment? And what do I do if I receive a check? You talked about this a little bit, but I have no idea where I can deposit it in the country I live in.
Yeah, so again, once that tool is working, and I would probably check right now, if it doesn't work, check tomorrow morning, go into the filer tool, right, which is also on irs.gov. They will have 2 portals for you to use. It's very easy to use, very clear, and just check to see if you can get into it. If you can get into it, you will be able to add your bank account information, change your mailing address. You should be able to, that's what they promised it should do. If you get a paper check, basically start asking people, where can you cash this, right? So, look at your local banks around the area to see if they'll cash it, or even try to see if you have friends and family back home that you trust. Obviously, you need to trust them, that you could endorse the check to. That's not what I would say is like the most official way to do it, but I do know that there are expats that get around this by endorsing checks and having very trusted friends and family cash it for them back in the States. But again, at your own risk.
Great. Oh, Julia, you're muted.
There you go. So our next question, I'm an American and am married to a non-US citizen resident. We've never lived together in the United States. and therefore he doesn't have a social security number, etc. My income has always been less than the threshold. Can I use the non-filer simplified form? Will I need to input his information? And if yes, where?
Okay, so if you're married to what the IRS calls an NRA, non-resident alien, so someone that does not live in the US and is not a US citizen, so does not have anything to do with the US and doesn't need to file, keep in mind your filing threshold is $5, right? It's not the $12,200 for single filers. If you don't meet that filing threshold and you don't need to file, all you have to do is use the non-filer platform that I talked about, right? That is the option for you. You don't need to enter his data anywhere. I don't think they're gonna ask you for it, right? If they do ask you, see if you can get around it, but generally they probably will not ask you for that information.
Super. Jennifer?
Yes, so I've tried entering my info into the Get My Payment tool when it opened today, but the system failed to locate my records. After 5 or so attempts, the system blocked me for 24 hours. The IRS will only have my old address on file since they are not processing paper 2019 returns currently, and I cannot provide direct deposit info through the tool since my info evidently doesn't match their records. What do I do?
So no one's input is matching their records for the most part right now. So first off, don't freak out. You are locked out, and it's more on your, I would say, your browser or anything, because I've tried definitely more than 5 times today, but I've tried at multiple points during the day. So for anyone that's trying, don't try 5 times at once, right? Or else you'll get locked out. But just wait till after the 24-hour period, try again. Do be careful, because if you try one more time in 24 hours and it does not work, just stop. Just wait another 24 hours or so to do it again, right? There is time. They're not going to send out a paper check immediately. They're going to give people time to enter their bank account information, because that also costs them money to send out a paper check and postage and all of that. But the main thing is, no, it's not working for most people. If you get locked out, just wait that time and do not try multiple times to get locked out, right? If it doesn't work the first time, you probably didn't enter your data wrong. Just give it an hour or so before you try again, or give it a day or so.
Thanks a lot. Rebecca?
Yeah, we're getting a number of questions from people who are saying that they have an income every year, they file every year, but they don't owe anything. So I guess the main concern or question is that if they get this stimulus payment, are they then going to have to pay it back at some point in the future?
No, it's not taxable income. So you will not have to pay it back. It's not a loan or anything. Once you get the money, that is your money. It is not taxable income.
Super. So next one is, I filed for every year in the US that I have lived in Germany, but have no US bank account on file, as I don't owe and don't receive a tax refund in the US. However, my German address is on file. Will a check or card with a refund be mailed to my German physical address? And can that check or card be cash deposited into a German bank account? So I know this is similar to what we've heard before, but I think, yes. What about the card?
I've never seen the IRS send out a card, like a prepaid debit card or anything like that, to Americans abroad. Maybe that's a situation in the US, but definitely to any clients I've had, it's always been a paper check, right? Because this is actually very normal. If you're filing your back taxes and you have a qualifying child, you can expect to probably get a refund of $1,000 to $1,400 per child. And they don't make direct deposit on that. So I have seen people just get these checks from the IRS for back years, 3 months at a time. Collect the checks, figure out some bank that will do it. It does not have to be your specific German bank. It could be just a separate bank in Germany that can cash it. Again, this is kind of where you just have to source information out. What bank will do it? Or is there another way you can somehow cash it through a trusted party in the US, etc.
Super, great. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Right. Yeah, so if I was over the threshold for 2018, but would be under for 2019, will I qualify when I file my 2019 taxes, or vice versa?
So if you were over the threshold for 2018, make sure you file your 2018 taxes, right? Mm-hmm. If you did not file that, then that means you're probably paper mailing it at this point, so it's going to take a while to get in the system. So for 2019, I mean, basically, if you don't think you should be filing because you're under the threshold, use the non-filer portal, because that's based on if you plan to file your 2019 taxes and your 2018 information is probably not in the system. But if you already filed your 2018 information, it should be in the system. You can use the filer portal, right? So you can use the normal portal for filers, and that should have records from 2018 and 19 if you already filed 2019.
Super. Rebecca?
So aside from the $1,200 relief money, what other kinds of relief is available to Americans abroad?
So there's a bunch of reliefs, right? The main ones is the money. Then I talked about the extended filing deadlines, which is quite a big relief for a lot of people. On top of that, I know that there are other ones, such as for student loans or estimated payments. You can find all of that on irs.gov, right? This webinar is specifically for the stimulus checks and taxes. But I would also say stay tuned, because as you know, hopefully it doesn't continue longer that we're in this situation. But if it does, I would imagine more things coming. And we are still very much at the beginning stages of it. So more information is being released on a day-to-day basis.
Great. And in fact, we're going to have a webinar in a few weeks because we know that there will be more updates, and Nathalie will be back to talk to us about those updates. So just kind of expanding on the question that Rebecca just asked, is there anything for self-employed or business owners, any form of relief that they can look for?
At the moment, we haven't seen anything specific for business owners or self-employed located abroad. So like I said, I would just wait to see what continues to come out, because right now the main focus is on the stimulus checks for individual taxpayers.
Great. Jennifer?
Yeah, there seems to be some confusion about how best to handle young adult children. Someone said that if your children are students and under 24, they can still be counted as dependents. First, is that true? And even if that is true, given the economic impact program, does it make more sense to not claim these young adults as dependents so they can apply themselves to the stimulus payments?
Yes, so you can claim them as dependents if they're under 24 and still a student, right? So there's definitely ways to claim them. Now the question is if that's a smart thing to do, right? Because if you claim them as a dependent, they're not eligible for the stimulus check. But as an expat, normally we don't owe any taxes, so having an extra dependent doesn't do much for us, because one, there's no more exemptions, and exemptions were what really helped us with dependents, but exemptions were taken out in 2018, and now there's only the standard deduction. So your dependents don't help you basically increase your deduction. That's one, unless, you know, they could get you a $500 credit if they count under that, but that's not refundable. So if you don't owe taxes and you don't need any credit on your tax return, there's not really a reason to claim them. I would say, like I said earlier, if they're under 17, generally you should claim them on your tax return, because you can probably get a refund for them from the additional child tax credit. And then you also get the $500, because remember, that's for qualifying children under 17. So a dependent that's over 20 or over 17 or 17 or older, you don't get the $500 for. But if they are over, you know, if they're 17 or over, maybe it's best for you not to claim them and they go ahead and go through the non-filer portal. Depends on your specific situation. I would say do a tax return where you have them as a dependent, see what the situation looks like. Do a tax return without them as a dependent, see what the situation looks like. And if in both situations you owe no tax, let them go ahead and try to claim their own stimulus check.
Super. And what is the date for, like if someone's 16 and turns 17, what date where would they be in the system? Does it matter?
They count the end of the 2019 tax year, so December 31st, 2019.
Super. So if someone's 17 in the middle of this year, they would still be eligible. Fantastic.
It's under 17. So if they just turned 17 this year, they were 16 last year, they should still be eligible.
Perfect. Great. Rebecca?
Yeah, so there's a number of questions about what kind of bank account can be used. So on the form on the IRS's website, does it have to be a US bank account? Some people have asked will the IRS use the bank account information that's been provided on previous FBARs to make the payment? And then another person is asked about, they currently receive Social Security payments into their French account. Is there any way that they can use that same account in order to receive this stimulus payment?
Right now, the information we have is it's a US bank account, right? Because to do your tax return, it has to be a US bank account. I know Social Security payments are different, and they do that in direct deposit for countries that have the totalization treaty with them. But this is mostly based on the US tax return. And keep in mind, all of these systems may fall under the government, but they are separate. So the IRS is a separate entity than the people paying out their Social Security benefits for the most part. The FBAR is completely separate. That is with the Treasury. And there's no chance that the Treasury is going to go through your data on the FBAR and pick out which bank account and pick a lucky one and give that back to the IRS. So I would say your best thing is just go into the filer portal, see what the IRS has on file, and enter a US bank account. You can try your French bank account. I'm pretty sure it's not going to work, but you can try it.
Here's another bank account question. So let's say our adult children they request relief, but they don't have a bank account to use. Can they use our bank account in the United States to receive the relief?
I know there can be issues if the direct deposit is rejected. So it really depends, because obviously when they make the direct deposit, it's going to be to that person's name, right? And there are banks that will reject direct deposits if it's to a name that's not the bank account holder. So I would check with your bank and see what's possible there, because basically the IRS is going to make 1 to 3 attempts to do a direct deposit. And once they cannot make a direct deposit, you will get a paper check to your mailing address.
Okay, so here's another question. If an expat who hasn't had any declarable income for 2017, 2018, and hasn't filed since 2016, and who therefore has no back taxes to pay, would he or she still be eligible or ineligible, excuse me, for the stimulus?
No, so I think the main question here that we didn't touch upon is what's your situation for 2019? So what you told me is that you don't need to file taxes 2016, 17, 18. Mm-hmm. That's great. Now, do you need to file taxes for 2019? If you do need to file taxes for 2019, get that in the system. If you do not need to file taxes for 2019 either, use the non-filer portal. You should still be eligible if you have a valid US Social Security number, if you are not claimed as a dependent on someone else's tax return, and obviously your income's not going to be over the income threshold, since you don't even think you have to file a tax return.
What if someone is married, filing separately, and their spouse is not a U.S. citizen? Do they qualify for the 2,400 relief or 1,200? Okay.
1,200.
All right. Rebecca?
I think this is our last question. There were a lot of people that were asking about if there was an extension for the FBAR, and when is the FBAR deadline for this year?
Yes, so there is no coronavirus extension for the FBAR. The FBAR is technically due today, April 15th. Before you freak out, the FBAR is due April 15th with an automatic extension till October 15th. Effectively meaning it's due October 15th, right? Just make sure that when you file the FBAR, you choose, you write in that you're using the automatic extension when they ask why you're filing late. So just pro tip for everyone. If you miss it, it should be fine, but just keep that in mind. And yeah, so generally October 15th, 2020, there's still quite some time.
That's going to be a big relief to a lot of people on the call, I know.
Perfect. Good. So that was the last question. Yeah. So, I can just quickly breeze over these, but it'll be in the slide. I won't go over it much. When you get the slide deck, there will be the general forms that you would be using as an expat to try to help you file your taxes if you're doing it on your own, or at least better understand the tax return you pay for. And then what are the different expat tax benefits that you should definitely be aware of as an expat. So read this on your own time if you want to know more, or just ask a professional and trust that they do what they should do. But I would always say you should be informed about your own financial situation. And otherwise, I hope you enjoyed the presentation. I really tried to make it, relatable and easy to understand, but it is taxes at the end, and I can only do my best to make it an enjoyable topic, but I do try. If you have questions about your own personal situation, go ahead and email support@myexpatTaxes.com. We really try to answer all the questions, even if you don't end up filing with us, because for us, especially for me as an expat myself, we shouldn't be scared about being expats. We should not be hiding under rocks. We should be, you know, we have to pay taxes, or not even pay, but we have to file taxes. So we do it, we're informed about it. And then getting to the next point, we should then vote, right? So I'll stop there and let Democrats Abroad come back.
Yes, exactly. And you know, I love to talk about voting. So first of all, thank you so very much, Natalie. We really appreciate you taking the time to join us to discuss a topic that everyone has on their minds. As a reminder to everyone on the call, just as Natalie said, please make sure you have registered or requested your ballot in your home state so that you're ready to vote in the general election. And I just want to remind everyone, even if you voted in the Democrats Abroad primary, that doesn't mean you've requested your ballot. It's a really important distinction. So please, if you haven't requested it yet, just go to votefromabroad.org and get started. Rebecca, would you like to wrap up the call today?
Sure. So just to kind of follow up, there were some other questions of people saying like, why can't we provide a non-US bank account? And these are all things, as mentioned earlier, that Democrats Abroad has been writing to the IRS and Treasury and Congress at large to lobby on your behalf. So something that you can personally do is you can actually contact your members of Congress to explain to them the problems that you've been facing. And we previously last year did a webinar called Contacting Your Members of Congress. So there's a link there in the presentation that we'll send out later as well. And if you want to be able to stay on top of all of the information about what Democrats Abroad is doing on your behalf in tax advocacy work, you can go to the Taxation Task Force blog and sign up for the mailing list. And sorry, where am I? And then finally, I think the last thing is, everybody, thank you so much for attending, and thank you for those that have donated. If you felt like this presentation was valuable, if you felt like this was useful, please do donate $10. All of that money goes towards helping to get out the vote, and we really, really appreciate it. And also, if you're interested in helping out with volunteering in terms of getting out the vote, or any of the other wonderful activities that we have going on all over the world, you can also sign up to volunteer with Democrats Abroad as well. And obviously, if you have any questions about voting or anything, you can always contact the Get Out the Vote team at gotv@democratsabroad.org. I think that's it.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. And y'all have a great rest of your day, evening and afternoon. Ciao.
Bye. Thank you.